Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast, where we explore the omnichannel digital journey of brands and retailers. I'm of course your co-host Sri, and please do listen to my older daughter's music at www.riaraj.com. That's R-H-E-A-R-A-J. My best friend and co-host, Mr. Peter, has corrected my grammar here, which I missed. It's elder daughter, not older daughter. And following the exciting adventures of my younger daughter, Laura, as well at Dream Academy by Hybe and Geffen Records on YouTube or Instagram. At the time of taping of the show, we were 2 weeks away from knowing whether she made the final girls band. At the time of release of this episode, maybe we're celebrating she's in the global girls band, the next Spice Girl. Joining me today, as I mentioned, is my best friend and co-host, expert in consumer insights, loyalty, and all things digital shelf, Mr. Bond. How are you today? Are you still grieving 3 months later from the Dodgers loss like I am for the Yankees, or like me, have you fast forward to pitchers and catchers showing up in March?
You know what? I've put it aside. Congrats to the Texas Rangers on their first World Series victory. I think that's great. No, Sri, I'm more concerned about this excitement about your younger daughter, Laura, and the possibility she could be part of the world's newest K-pop sensation girls band. This is really exciting. I mean, I'm like giddy over all of this. And, you know, the first thing is the last couple of years I've been immersed in everything that's been going on with Rhea and her musical career. I know she's getting ready for another big single release coming up in January. But then Laura, I remember one day I was listening to you on the phone and I heard this melodic voice in the background. And I thought, wow. And I said to you that Rhea's really got some range there. And you said, that's not Rhea. No, that's Laura. And I'm like, oh my God. I was just blown away, and I know that she's the real deal. Can't wait. Hopefully by the time this episode airs, we'll know that she's part of this new sensation. Really excited, Sharif. Glad to be doing this with you today.
Thank you for that, Peter. But before we get to our guest, let me remind everyone to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And if you use Apple or Spotify, please do give us a rating, because what the rating does, it helps feed the algorithm, makes our podcast much more easily findable. But more importantly, the rating also tells Peter and me, do we have the right guests and are having the right conversations on the podcast? We want to express how honored we are to be rated the #1 CPG podcast for 2 years running, according to FeedSpot, the leading podcast ranking authority in the US. We're pleased to have joined us in our top 30, our sister cast, CPG Scoop, CPG Guys Fast Forward, and the FMCG Guys. We're also happy to be formal sponsors on Next Up, whose mission is to advance all women in business. In 2024, we have a new partnership. We're doing things all year long. Please do listen into the podcast and partake in all the many things we're doing together. And if you want to know more, you can also drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com so you can take advantage of what Next Up has to offer. Links to our podcast, our sister cast, the landing page on Next Up that we have may be found. Digital liner notes of this podcast. And now on to our guest. Our guest graduated Duke University and then went into DNA identification as a founder. Peter, the first person who has actually come from a DNA identification background. She has since worked in genotyping, followed by leading Upspring Baby, and then founded OrganiCare. When I looked at her profile, I knew we're going to have an amazing conversation all the way from DNA. I'm going to guess that has something to do with the government, all the way to babycare. And I got to say, in her 2+ decade tenure founding and leading companies and brands, Caroline Goodner has focused on doing good, whether in the baby category or today in feminine hygiene. So join Peter and me in giving a warm welcome to Caroline Goodner. Caroline, welcome to the CPG Guys. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we get to the questions we have prepared for you, would you please give us a description of OrganiCare LLC and your role as co-founder CEO?
Sure. Yes, OrganiCare, we make more effective over-the-counter healthcare products. And our focus is really on FemaClear, which is our brand for vaginal healthcare products. And they only have natural ingredients. So we've proven more effective with natural ingredients, and we address conditions that have been horribly under-innovated or not innovated in at all, like bacterial vaginosis, yeast infection, genital herpes, all the stuff no woman wants, but when they get it, they really want to have a good solution to help deal with it. And so that's what we do.
All right. Thank you for that. In the digital liner notes of this episode, we'll include links to your LinkedIn profile, of course, Caroline, and OrganiCare's as well, both the LinkedIn page and the website. So our listeners can access it while we go on with our conversation. So here we kick it off first by always asking people about their careers. Yours is an inspirational one, as I mentioned, from Duke University to genotyping to other leadership roles for brands and to babycare, now co-founding and leading a brand in feminine care. Take us through the years from Duke University and how you got here.
Gosh, it's a lot of years. I'll try to be brief. No, back at Duke, kind of was just enjoying college, didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. Certainly when I got out, got a job with a big company like a lot of people did back then, and worked for a couple of different larger companies and realized that was not for me. And I didn't still know what I wanted to do until I went back to business school at Rice in Houston. And in my second year, took an entrepreneurship class, and it really kind of changed my viewpoint and realized that's what I wanted to do. I actually created my first business plan in class at business school and started it when I got out. And so that's kind of the story of that DNA company you were talking about. It was called Identigene. And I'm proud to say that there are still Identigene paternity tests in drugstores like Walgreens and CVS even today. And so we started out in paternity testing and then got into forensic DNA testing. So yes, it did involve government and kind of prosecution or defense using DNA. So that was my first company, and ran that for about 14 years and ended up selling it to a strategic. Following that, had a company in the genotyping space to support research scientists who use animal husbandry to breed mice with certain genetic conditions. And then after that, I was an investor in Upspring Baby and became CEO for a few years and took Upspring from sort of not profitable to profitable, proud of that. And they continued to grow and ended up selling to Reckitt a few years ago. And then about 8 years ago, I co-founded OrganiCare, which is where I am now. And we really started with a tech. We started with a technology that is now patented and is very core to, kind of the efficacy first ideal that we have at OrganiCare. So when we have conditions like BV and yeast infection and herpes, people want to know that, the product that they use is going to really work. So that's what we lead with whenever we talk about our products. The fact that we also have natural ingredients is a big, big plus, especially for women putting products in that most intimate spot in their bodies. And so, this current role is probably one of the most exciting of my career. And it's just been, a fabulous ride so far, and can't wait to see kind of where we go from here.
Thank you and welcome to the podcast, Caroline. Two things before I get to my question. Right now, I've got Maury Povich going through my head. You are not the father. So
no, I did a lot of those shows.
I can imagine. But I also think if you were to test the DNA of Shri and I think the common element would be a certain popular cola beverage would be the genomic link between the two of us. But in any event, let's talk a little bit about leadership, because obviously as you've started up these businesses, the bigger they get, the more you have organizations. For the organizations to grow and thrive, you have to surround yourself with highly productive people. So I'd love to hear from you what leadership attributes you think have served you well over the years and ultimately driven the success of your career. And frankly, since you're very entrepreneurial, the businesses that you've helped found. And how do you think about staffing a team around you to help drive that success?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think continued learning is one of my core beliefs and something I subscribe to. I've been, kind of a member of an entrepreneurs organization that's global, meet with entrepreneurs all the time and, constantly trying to learn how to get better. And so I'm a big believer in consuming lots of business books, and whatever the problem of the day is, trying to get best practices from other people and not trying to figure all that stuff out on my own. I will say, I think one of the qualities you have to have, at least as an entrepreneur like I am, is persistence, because you're going to run into a lot of problems, and maybe as for any leader. is figuring out when a problem confronts you, you've got to figure a way around it. You can't just let it take over. But in terms of, building a team, when I'm hiring people, I feel like past experience is the best predictor of future performance. And so, I like to look at that and choose people not based on theoretical questions you might ask in an interview, but more on what have they done and what are they likely to do moving forward. So I try to subscribe to that. And then, I am a big believer in not just continue learning for me, but continue learning for the teams. And we have a coach that works with us each quarter when we do our quarterly planning. And as part of that, kind of quarterly cadence of getting together offsite for a couple of days and talking about where are we taking the business in the next 90 days, obviously touching on also annual plans, quarterly or multi-year plans as well. We measure actually how well we're doing as a team. I'm a follower of Pat Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. And that's kind of fun to kind of see where are we, if we don't have trust, which is kind of the foundational element. If we don't have trust among our members, you're not going to be able to have healthy conflict. And anyway, he's got a great model that I think works very well for helping build healthy teams. And we try to pay attention to it. We talk about it every quarter and between. And so I'm really proud of our team. We've got some great people, and people first. People are the most important thing you can start with.
People first, and you mentioned, doing the offsites, looking at the next 90 days. I'm thinking to myself, looking at the brand, you started OrganiCare right before COVID. And no surprise here that in the last couple of years, it appears private investor funding has completely dried up. So how have you sustained business, and how do you approach investments into the company?
Yeah, thankfully, we had some very solid, good angel investors early on, high net worth people that invested into the company. And I'm not going to lie, there were some scary times right at the point in COVID because we were looking to raise money. And we just made, kind of some tough decisions right when COVID hit. One of the other things that was tough about it, in addition to funding and not being able to kind of get the funding that we thought we were going to get, is that the shopping habits of consumers drastically changed. Everybody went for sort of the tried and true, well-known, very well-established brands because they were just running in the store and coming out or getting home delivery. And so kind of new products like ours were less in consideration. So it was tough, but we still managed to grow. I will say that. But we did have good investors early on that did support us through those tough times. And we also had a strong board that kind of helped us see that we needed to get to break even sooner than we thought. And that good advice helped us earlier than I think most people realized. Hey, there's not going to be much of a tolerance anymore for operating in the red. And sure enough, kind of today's world, people want to see that you've got profitability.
So early in my professional career, I spent a year working for a very prominent feminine care brand, coupled with the fact that Shri and I both live in households where we are by far the minority and are the males of the household much lower in the pecking order. It's a particular industry that is completely familiar to us as also being the primary shoppers in the household. But why don't you walk our audience through the portfolio of products? You made some reference early on as you were introducing the company, but we'd really like to know how you built your portfolio and the need states that you were seeking to address, and the proposition you talked about in terms of what differentiates you from some of the big players that are in the organization, why that will appeal to certain consumer segments.
Yeah, we really focus on conditions that are really aggravating, can be painful, can be, very disruptive to quality of life. They're not something that a lot of companies have innovated much in these areas. And prior to kind of our products, is sort of in the same products on the shelf for yeast infection, for example, is a pretty well established category. But we offer something different. We offer something different in terms of the way our technology works. Not only is it all natural, but our products kill these microbes. In the case of yeast infection, it's yeast, and it kills the yeast across the broad spectrum of different strains of yeast, which is important because a lot of people who get recurring yeast infections, some of the old typical, either prescription or over-the-counter solutions stop working for these resistant Candida strains. And so our ThermoClear product works differently, and it just sort of eliminates those yeast strains on contact. With bacterial vaginosis, this is the most problematic and most common vaginal condition that we address. It's got some really awful symptoms that nobody wants, makes people feel unclean and embarrassed, and we don't want them to feel that way at all. It's very, very common, and that's one of the things we try to preach is these are common conditions. Don't feel bad. Let's just help you get it taken care of. But BV is something that, even the main prescription that's used only cures like 60 to 70% of the cases. So whereas, in our clinical studies that we've done, we show that over 90% of women say that all of their symptoms are eliminated. So we are able, because we do so much studying of our product, both lab testing using standardized FDA, ASTM testing, and clinical studies showing the use of the product in humans, is what differentiates us, I think, from other products that are available. And that's what we make our claims from, and that is kind of the very core of who we are, is to make sure these products work and get feedback from the consumers on how was their experience. So yeast infection, BV, genital herpes, that's one of the most stigmatized conditions there is. 1 in 5 women has it. It's incredibly common, and most people don't know that. And a lot of people suffer in silence. We're hoping to just kind of open up the conversation and let people talk about it. And there's no cure for herpes. We're not offering anything like that. That would be crazy. We are offering a better way to manage the outbreaks. And the outbreaks are shorter. They're less painful. We get reports from women who say they, so painful, unbearable. And now they've got a solution that really makes it much more bearable. We also are building out adjacent products to kind of more fully address what the consumer that gets these conditions has. So we've got washes and supplements to both help maintain and or prevent these conditions from recurring. And one of the newest products we have are what we call our infection protection products. And so it's like a lot of women who get these recurring issues, they know what triggers it. And so for like BV or UTI, sex is a big trigger. So if they use these products right after sex, it's likely to prevent the condition from flaring up. So we are excited to have kind of a broader and broader spectrum of products that kind of more fully address the condition at every step. And when used as a regimen, we're hoping they need that treatment product less and less often. But UTI is the latest condition that we have added to kind of our list of conditions. But we want to continue to broaden, and there's a lot of applicability for our technology. And we want to help with these recurring things that just aggravate women so much.
Caroline, it's good to hear you talk about clinicals backing claims. That doesn't happen 100% of the time. So that's, I would think, a big win for your brand portfolio and the different efficacies that you're actually serving. So let me remind our audience that we're speaking with Caroline Goodner, co-founder, CEO at the OrganiCare company. The world has changed in the last 3 years to be completely omni-channel. Digital is just a way of life these days. How did you adapt over the pandemic and stay abreast of these trends, especially in the categories that you are in, which is where privacy thrives?
Yeah, for sure. We saw so many changes. I mean, obviously, Amazon got even bigger. It's a behemoth, but, the kind of really core brick and mortar channels, drug channel, mass channel that we're in grocery as well, but drug is our biggest one. We're seeing these big companies shift to home delivery, curbside pickup. Certainly over the pandemic, that was happening even more. And you're right, particularly with, a herpes product or even BV or yeast. Some people don't feel comfortable buying those out of a brick and mortar store. It's more convenient to get it from an online source. And, what we found is you just want to be anywhere the customer wants to buy. And one of the things that we noticed is self-checkout in the drug channel is kind of helpful in this way because it can, preserve the privacy to a certain extent. But we also see that the younger generation, they're much more open about talking about these things. And we kind of think that's a good thing just because we don't want people to feel shame. We don't want people to feel embarrassed. We understand that's a reality for a lot of folks, but again, talking about it, having, people on TikTok, talk about having these conditions and how to address them in a better way has been really helpful to us. And so, you just need to be available where people want to buy. And brick and mortar has always been a big part of that, but for sure, marketplaces online are really big too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Marketplaces, or even if you have your own D2C business, you want to be where the consumers are. You want to make yourself available. And it was funny, I was at the Amazon Accelerate conference out in Seattle a couple of weeks ago. There were a whole bunch of sellers there, and I was speaking with one notable seller. Said that he focuses all of his Amazon advertising not to drive people to his D2C site, but to the Amazon site. And I said, why would you do that? They don't mind if you do that. And he said, because the friction's a lot lower. The person doesn't have to enter in all their credit card information. And since I'm a 3P seller, I'm going to get all their address information, their purchase behavior anyway, and I can work on them later. But if my goal is to get that first sale, if I get that first sale and they try my product, they're going to love it. They're going to want to come back and buy it. I'll worry about that. Much rather have that. So that's a really interesting approach. So in addition to FemiClear, you have another brand. You want to tell us a little bit about Curoxin, what makes it different, and how you are managing those two brands within the OrganiCare portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. So Curoxin was our first baby, and we started out in the first aid space. And so just to give you a little background on kind of where the tech came from, we have a co-founder from Italy. Not surprising, this oxygenated olive oil, which is the basis of our technology, came from Italy, where their olive oil is, you think of Italy when you think of olive oil, and this is a very special kind of olive oil, and they use this technology, which kind of, I'll give the quick little science lesson. When you oxygenate this oil that has a special kind of spec to it, the oxygen binds with the fatty acid in the oil, and it creates natural peroxide bonds. And these peroxide bonds, you know about hydrogen peroxide, that's a water-based peroxide bond. This is an oil-based peroxide bond. And they're highly antimicrobial. They also can heal wounds. And so in Italy, in the medical channel, hospitals, clinics, doctors, they were using this tech to cure really chronic, persistent wounds like bed sores and diabetic ulcers. And, I've seen a lot of pictures of really a lot of bad wounds that got healed once they used this product. So that was our original idea, was to bring this to the U.S. consumer in the first aid space. And honest to goodness, it is such a dynamite product. It's a really healthy alternative to Neosporin. And I know everybody likes their Neosporin, but there are 3 different antibiotics in there that cause allergic reactions in 10% of people and all that. This does not. And it kills E. coli and staph and even MRSA, which are known to be hugely resistant bacteria. We also have an oral care product of Curoxin that is good for mouth sores and cold sores. But, in 2019, when we first introduced our yeast infection FemiClear product, we kind of realized, given the size and scope of our company, we needed to focus on one brand. So we made the decision back in 2020 to focus on FemiClear, and that's really what we've been doing. We love Curoxin. It continues to do well. It still has distribution and a lot of really big fans, but we really are focused on the FemiClear brand now as just a way of choosing kind of to be less spread thin and more focused on the vaginal health area.
Good to hear. Congratulations on the brand as well and the efficacy for that as well. So scaling out of D2C and Amazon requires going into retail partnerships and in-store. So how have you thought about and approached retail partnerships to drive scale? And then how are you actually doing this for OrganiCare?
Yeah, we are lucky, I think, in a sense that we are able to go direct to our buyers. And so we have, our own internal team that works with our buyers. In some cases, we use a broker as well, but we never abdicate that relationship to the broker exclusively. And we've created, I think, real partnerships with our buying teams. And they've come to rely on us as educators in these very specific kind of vaginal health conditions. And we educate not only on conditions we have a product for, but even on other vaginal health areas that we know these buyers need to be as up to speed as possible. And so they welcomed those kind of learning quarterly meetings and strategy meetings. And so we have felt that, being true partners and being willing to try things that the buyers want us to try has been a great way of truly partnering. And I think it's created really strong relationships with us and our retail partners. And I can't say enough about that. I think there are certain retailers where buyer turnover is more frequent. And so when a new buyer comes into that seat, it may be a category they've never heard of before. And so we try to quickly get them up to speed. There's usually a nice handoff of the previous person helping us connect with that new buyer. And so that's how we've tried to, be a good partner to our retailers.
So, Caroline, let me close this out. This is a great story. What an interesting way you entered into this with oxidized olive oil to help clear wounds, and then moved into femcare as a mechanism. And I love the story about starting off in big business and realizing that was not your path to the future. So I want to close with talking about entrepreneurship, because I still think about when I was at NYU Stern, my big project for entrepreneur class I had this great vision of why don't we combine, this will date me, why don't we combine home pizza delivery with home video delivery? I thought those two products, who would imagine that it would be pizza that outlived the video? The last Blockbuster store is closed. Oh, well, streaming service be damned. But what advice do you have for particularly other women who want to pursue an entrepreneurial career? What do they need to be thinking about if they want to make the most out of that particular direction?
Yeah, first of all, if you have an interest, if you have a pretty thick skin, and again, back to that persistence quality, go for it. I so applaud women who, have a great idea and they want to execute on it and they want to see some new innovation come to the market. They think they can do things in a different way and a better way. I'd love to see that come to fruition. And I try to help women do that. I like to mentor, and I've done that quite a bit. And now, there's been, just like you guys, supporting women in business is so important. And so I love what you're doing. And there's a lot of resources now of, kind of investment funds, VC funds that are exclusively or favor women-led businesses. And so I would just encourage women to go seek those out. There's support organizations, nonprofits or even for-profits that do this to help women find those kind of either financial resources or strategy resources or whatever it takes along the way. And I have to put a plug in for the Entrepreneurs Organization as well. That's a great organization to get involved with. And even if you're sub 1 or 2 million in revenue, which is what the qualifying criteria is to get in, they have accelerator programs. So they'll help you when you're younger, smaller, to get to that next level. And they're great educational opportunities for women who are starting out and they want to have that support surrounding them. So I think it's wonderful. I love seeing more and more women enter the ranks.
Good to hear. Congratulations on the success of both brands here. Let me remind our audience that you can find all of our content by going to a web browser and simply typing cpgguys.com as the URL. And if you think your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, simply drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that email is contact@cpgguys.com. Maybe you can join us on this podcast like Caroline did today. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com in the navigation bar up top. What that does is helps inform Peter and me how we're doing, and the quality of our conversations is exactly what you want to hear. Thank you to the 27,000 plus followers on LinkedIn. Without you, this podcast wouldn't exist. We know it's a big number, so we thank you for all the communication you have with us and for making this education journey so much more fun. Caroline, thank you for making time to be on the CPG Guys.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for doing what you're doing for women in business. Great.
Thank you. And Peter, would love to hear the summarized learnings from this episode from you.
This was great. And thank you, Caroline, for joining us. I think starting off with, like a lot of us thinking going and working for a big corporation is what you do when you got out of college. And after she had done that, realizing that wasn't necessarily the direction for her, and a pivotal course in entrepreneurship at the Jones School of Business at Rice really helped her focus on starting her own business. I love the story on building paternity tests that could be purchased in retail stores, and then genomic testing around breeding mice, which led to other capabilities, and ultimately the founding of OrganiCare as more ethical and natural, but highly effective mechanisms for addressing all sorts of aggravating conditions that to some degree all of us suffer at one point or another in our lives. The elements of being a successful leader is always learning, always asking questions, and being persistent at what you do. And that surround your team with people who are proven performers, right? Past experience is a great predictor of future performance, and it's more about what you've done, not necessarily whether you do a really great interview. But making sure that those people have the opportunity to learn just like she's learning. I loved her reference to Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. That's, I think, back to my organizational behavior courses. This is the kind of stuff I'm like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I love all my pyramid graphs and charts, very important. The investment side of things, always a challenge, particularly during the pandemic. She was fortunate to have really great angel investors, but had to make some tough decisions at the beginning of the pandemic to keep the company going. Making sure that she's always focused on understanding where shopping habits are going. It's kind of like I'm going to bring it back, the Wayne Gretzky approach, to go where the puck is going, and making sure that you have a really strong board that can help advise you and guide you on the decisions that you need to make. I loved her going through the product portfolio, talking about the fact that she focused on aggravative and disruptive conditions, where innovation had really not kept pace with what consumer needs were, and that they came to the market with differentiated technology that had better efficacy. And it was based on a substantial amount of research and testing. So that's always really encouraging. The pandemic had a tremendous effect on omnichannel. It shifted where they put their business. Obviously, Amazon is a big driver. They have their own D2C, but they wanted to be in an omnichannel world, but they also have understood that they needed to be in retail as well. And they built out a retail sales organization, not dependent necessarily on brokers. Yeah, they used sales and marketing agencies for some things, but for the primary mechanism of reaching the CVS and Walgreens and what have you in the world, the retail sales force was integral to building relationships with those clients and getting them to accept the product. That it was great to hear that their second line was their original line of business, Curoxin, which is focused on addressing chronic and challenging wounds, and it came from, who knew it, olive oil of all things, and some particular technology associated with that. And lastly, if you want to get into the entrepreneurship game, have great ideas, be persistent about pursuing your objective. Find mentors who are going to help bring you along, or not only just provide you with education, but I think it's even more important that they be sponsors more than just mentors. And ultimately, make sure that as you're doing that, join organizations, entrepreneurship organizations that provide you with training, education, accelerator programs. All that is going to help you in your pursuit of a career. So really great conversation, Sri. That's what I heard today.
Fantastic summary, Peter. But you used an acronym somewhere in there that I think a majority of your audience may or may not understand. At least half the audience, the Gen Zs and the millennials. Decompose Maury Popovich.
Maury Povich. Oh, yeah. So if you don't know, he's the husband of Connie Chung, who was a longtime CBS news reporter and co-anchor of the evening news with Dan Rather at one point. But he went to fame by having a syndicated television show where every couple of episodes he would bring on two people, the woman usually claiming that the man was the father, and they would do a paternity test. And he was most notable at opening up the manila envelope, reading the results, and going, "Shri, you are not the father." So it's classic television. I encourage you to go to YouTube and just search for Maury Povich. It is guilty pleasure television at its best.
Indeed, and I'll admit I've watched enough of those episodes back in the days. So let me thank Caroline, Peter, both of you for joining me this afternoon. That's a wrap.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.